Hey guys, welcome back to Real Talk Cinema, your go to channel for deep movie explanations, hidden meanings, and cinematic facts you might have missed. Today, we're diving into the heartwarming yet emotionally intense family drama, Radio Flyer, 1992, a film that explores the power of imagination, childhood trauma, and brotherly love. Let's begin this powerful journey. The opening scene of Radio Flyer is not simply a prologue, it is the heartbeat of the entire film, a deeply emotional gateway that immediately signals to the audience that this story is not just about the past, but about how the past lives inside us, shapes us, and quietly influences the way we raise our own children. We are introduced to an adult Mike, voiced by Tom Hanks, whose soft, thoughtful narration carries the unmistakable weight of a man who has spent years quietly wrestling with the ghosts of his childhood. As he drives with his two young sons through serene suburban streets, the world around them seems peaceful, ordinary, and untouched by tragedy. But there's something in Mike's tone, something just beneath his carefully chosen words, that tells us what we are about to hear is no ordinary story. It is a deeply buried piece of his soul that he has likely never fully shared before. This car ride, simple as it seems, becomes the vehicle through which Mike finally confronts his own memories, guilt, and unresolved pain. The way Mike begins to tell the story is almost therapeutic, as if he is not just sharing it for his sons, but also for himself. His words are laced with a tender sadness, and from the very first sentence, we understand that this is a man who has carried a silent weight for decades. There's a sense that he has waited a long time for this moment, a moment where he can finally put into words what his younger self could never fully comprehend. As his voice lingers over the memory, the screen gently transitions to the dusty, sun-bleached streets of his childhood, pulling us backward in time, into a world that seems both magical and threatening, where adventure is laced with danger, and where dreams are desperately needed to survive unbearable reality. Mike and his younger brother Bobby were not just typical boys seeking fun, they were boys seeking escape, seeking safety, seeking a world that didn't hurt. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in the fire of shared trauma and desperate hope. What makes the opening even more powerful is the unspoken realization that Mike's decision to tell this story now, to his own sons, is his way of breaking the cycle of silence. Perhaps no one else has heard this story. Perhaps he has locked it away for years, uncertain whether it should ever be spoken aloud. But in this moment, with his sons by his side, Mike chooses honesty. He chooses to pass on not just a memory, but a lesson about courage, resilience, and the astonishing power of belief. The story Mike begins to unfold is not told in the cold language of fact. It is told through the warm, sometimes blurred lens of memory, where reality and imagination are tightly woven together. It is this choice that gives Radio Flyer its unique emotional power. Mike doesn't tell his sons a story that is strictly true in the literal sense. He tells them the story in the only way he knows how to survive it. The careful way the film balances these two realities is what makes the opening so profound. It tells us, right from the start, that some truths are too painful to face head on, and that sometimes we need to create our own version of events to live with them. As the car glides smoothly through the streets, and Mike's voice gently pulls us into the past, there is a haunting silence that lingers between his sentences, as if he is carefully sifting through memories, deciding which pieces are safe to share and which still ache too deeply to be fully spoken. His sons listen intently, unaware of the magnitude of the story their father is entrusting them with. They hear an adventure, but Mike is giving them so much more. He is offering them a window into his pain, a glimpse of his childhood bravery, and the quiet message that even when life becomes unbearable, hope can be built from the smallest, most fragile things, like an old red wagon. The beauty of this opening scene is its layered simplicity. On the surface, it is a man telling his sons about when he was a boy, but beneath it, it is the emotional unraveling of years of guilt, love, trauma, and the desperate need to believe that Bobby found his freedom, That Bobby's story did not end in violence, but in flight, in escape, in something extraordinary. Mike's decision to finally speak this story aloud is not just for his sons, it is for himself. It is an act of healing. It is the long overdue acknowledgement that some stories don't need to be entirely true to be entirely necessary. Through this carefully constructed, deeply emotional opening, Radio Flyer doesn't simply begin. It invites us to carry the story, to question it, to feel its weight, and to understand that sometimes survival depends not on the facts, but on the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense at all. The second chapter of Radio Flyer unfolds with a bittersweet transition. A family on the move, a mother clinging to the promise of a better tomorrow, and two young boys quietly carrying the invisible weight of their past. After enduring years of pain, disappointment, and heartbreak, Mike, Bobby, and their mother pack up their lives in the hope that a simple change of place will be enough to heal the deep wounds life has already carved into their hearts. Their arrival in a new town is framed with quiet optimism, as if the universe is offering them a clean canvas, a place where the stains of the past might finally be left behind. The streets here seem wider, the air feels lighter, and there's a sense that perhaps they finally found the kind of home they've been chasing, a place where the world won't hurt them. But as the story gently unfolds, we realize that sometimes pain is not confined by geography. Sometimes the past is not something we leave behind, it's something we unknowingly bring with us. Their mother, played with quiet determination and soft exhaustion, is a woman desperately trying to rebuild, to believe in happiness again. She is not just moving to a new house, she is trying to outrun her own failures, trying to give her sons the life she has always dreamed of but never managed to secure. Her eyes carry hope, but also a fragile desperation, the kind of hope that clings to new beginnings like a life raft. It is during this chapter that she meets the man who will soon become their stepfather, a man they will call the king. To her, he seems like the answer to all her silent prayers, a chance at stability, a partner who can help her carry the burden she's been shouldering alone. But what she cannot see, what she is heartbreakingly blind to, is that the cycle she tried so hard to escape is quietly creeping back into their lives under a new face, in a new house, with new promises. What makes this part of the story so emotionally devastating is that the mother's mistake is not born from neglect or cruelty, it is born from exhaustion, from longing, from a deeply human need to believe that things can finally get better. She sees the king through the lens of her hope, not through the lens of her son's growing fear. Mike and Bobby, though young, sense something darker lurking beneath their new stepfather's charm, but they are trapped in a situation where their voices are too small to be heard, where their fears dissolve in the shadow of their mother's love for a man who will soon become their tormentor. The new town is not just a backdrop, it is a false promise. The streets, the parks, the playgrounds, they all suggest freedom, but inside the walls of their home, another prison is quietly being built. This is the cruel irony of their new beginning. In chasing a fresh start, they have unknowingly stumbled into another chapter of suffering. The move was supposed to be their salvation, but instead, it becomes the setting for the most painful chapter of their young lives. This moment in the story is profoundly layered because it forces us to confront the heartbreaking reality that sometimes people run from the wrong thing. They try to escape places when what they really need to escape are patterns, wounds, and choices that follow them no matter where they go. Mike and Bobby's arrival in the new town marks not just a physical move, it marks the beginning of their inner journey, their growing realization that the only true escape might not be found in a different house or a new city, but in the extraordinary world they will build together. A world where wings can grow from the wheels of an old red wagon, and where even the most broken hearts can find a way to fly. As Mike, Bobby, and their mother settle into their new town, the story takes a subtle but deeply unsettling turn with the arrival of the king, the man who would soon become their stepfather. On the surface, he seems to offer the very stability their mother has been desperately seeking. A strong figure who can help shoulder the burdens of raising two young boys alone. For a fleeting moment, the house feels fuller, the meals feel warmer, and their mother's laughter seems genuine again. She clings to him not out of blind naivety, but from a place of profound exhaustion and longing. She wants to believe that this man is different, that life has finally given her a partner who will protect, not harm. But beneath his outward charm, something is wrong, something the boys can sense even before the first crack shows. What makes the king such a terrifying presence is that the film never fully shows his face. He is deliberately filmed as a faceless entity, often framed from the waist down, his towering body always present but never fully seen. This creative choice is not accidental, it turns him into something larger than life, a shapeless embodiment of fear itself. He becomes a ghostly figure of menace, an omnipresent threat that exists more in the boy's psyche than in the physical space. His most defining feature is not his voice or his face, but his belt, which becomes a chilling symbol of his control, his punishment, his reign of terror. The belt hangs heavy in the air, always a moment away from violence, always reminding Mike and Bobby that their home is no longer safe. The psychological power of the king is devastating because it forces the boys to live in a constant state of hyper-awareness. They measure their words, their footsteps, their very breathing against his moods. The home, which was supposed to be their sanctuary, has now become a battlefield where silence is a survival tactic, and imagination is the only refuge. Mike, as the older brother, feels an immense but impossible responsibility to protect Bobby, and this guilt becomes the emotional thread he will carry into adulthood. The mother, blinded by her desire for love, fails to see the terror building right under her roof, and this painful ignorance adds another layer of tragedy. The king's facelessness does something extraordinary. It makes him universal. He is not just their abuser. He becomes a representation of all abusers, all unchecked violence that happens behind closed doors. By refusing to give him a full identity, the film forces us to focus on the damage he inflicts rather than who he is. He is a shadow in their lives, and his presence drives the boys deeper into their imaginations, deeper into their secret plan for escape. His looming threat is what pushes them to believe that the impossible, the idea of a flying wagon, is their only path to freedom. In this chapter of the story, the king becomes not just a stepfather, but the ultimate symbol of fear, the inescapable force that will shape every choice the boys make from this point forward. There comes a moment in Radio Flyer where the crushing weight of reality pushes the boys to reach for something extraordinary. And it is in that desperate grasp that the old, battered red Radio Flyer wagon quietly becomes the most sacred symbol in their lives. At first, the wagon is nothing more than a piece of forgotten childhood, rusted from years of weather, its paint chipped and its wheels creaking as if its time had already passed. But to Mike and Bobby, this simple wagon does not represent the past. It represents the possibility of a future, a key to something beyond the suffocating walls of their home, beyond the bruises, beyond the endless cycle of terror inflicted by the king. The wagon is their blank canvas, their beacon, their single fragile thread connecting them to the idea that there must be something more than the pain they have known. It is not a decision born of playfulness. When the boys look at the wagon, they do not see a toy, they see salvation. The wagon becomes their secret weapon, their great escape, their rebellion against the invisible chains that bind them. Bobby, the younger of the two, who should be consumed by cartoons and bike rides, instead finds himself consumed by the belief that this wagon, if they can just build it right, can fly him away from his nightmare. His childlike faith in this dream is not naive, it is necessary, it is survival. For Bobby, the idea of flying away is no different from breathing. It is the only way he knows how to keep his heart beating in a world that tries to crush it daily. Mike, the older brother, feels this with even more devastating intensity. He knows the odds, he knows that wagons do not fly, that children do not build rockets in backyards. And yet, his love for Bobby, His unbearable guilt for being unable to protect him from the king pushes him to embrace the impossible. For Mike, the project is not just about building a machine, it is about building hope, constructing a new reality where his brother can be safe. Every day spent working on the wagon, every new part they attach, every sketch they make, is a defiant act against their helplessness. The wagon becomes a tangible expression of their will to survive in a world where they are constantly voiceless. What makes the wagon's symbolism so extraordinary is the way it begins to straddle two worlds, the real and the imagined. The film never confirms whether the wagon truly gains the ability to fly, and that is where its deepest emotional power lies. To the boys, the wagon's flight is an undeniable truth. But to us, as viewers standing outside their pain, it becomes a complex question. Is this a miracle or a story Mike has chosen to tell himself to protect what is left of his own soul? This ambiguity is not a flaw, it is the heart of the film's brilliance. It invites us to step into the mind of a child forced to create magic where none exists, to see the world not as it is, but as it must be in order to endure it. The wagon absorbs not just their creative energy, but their entire emotional universe. It becomes their safe place, their shared mission, their rebellion, their lifeboat. It represents the courage to dream, even when dreaming feels foolish. It is the desperate scream of two boys telling the world that they refuse to accept the cage they've been given. The radio flyer wagon is the most innocent object, a child's toy, but in their hands it becomes a weapon against despair. It is as if they are telling the universe, if you will not save us, we will save ourselves. Mike's determination to build the wagon for Bobby is not simply about helping him fly away, it is also about atonement. Mike knows deep in his heart that he cannot stop the beatings. He cannot stand between Bobby and the king without risking everything. And so, he clings to this project because it gives him purpose. It gives him a way to be Bobby's protector in the only way he knows how. The wagon becomes his redemption, his gift of love, his silent promise that even if the world has failed them, he will not. As the story progresses, the wagon takes on an almost sacred presence. It is not just wood and metal, it is layered with their tears, their hope, their unspoken fears. It becomes alive with meaning. The film does not need to spell out whether the wagon truly flies, because the truth is already clear. For Bobby and Mike, it had to fly, it must fly. Because sometimes, what saves us is not whether something is literally possible, it is whether we can believe in it enough to keep going. The radio flyer wagon is not just their invention, it is their survival, their freedom, their final rebellion against a life that has been anything but kind. And from this point forward, it is not just a wagon, it is their wings dot. As Radio Flyer gently moves forward, the story begins to wrap itself even tighter around one of the most powerful forces in a child's world, imagination. For Mike and Bobby, imagination is no longer a playful pastime. It becomes a fortress, a shield, a secret place where they can retreat when reality is too brutal to face. The power of imagination in this story is not presented as mere fantasy. It is presented as a life-saving force, a necessary construction that allows the boys to carve out a space where hope can survive. Their imaginations become the one thing that the king cannot touch, the one place where his belt, his rage, and his looming presence cannot follow. It is in this hidden world, built entirely from their dreams, that Mike and Bobby begin to plot not just escape, but liberation, freedom that defies the very laws of gravity and logic. The brothers begin to pour their entire hearts into the construction of the flying wagon, but beyond the nuts and bolts, they begin to imagine a world where pain cannot reach them, where flight is possible, and where Bobby can soar beyond the reach of his abuser. They build their world in their minds first, sketching it out, talking about how it would feel to fly, believing in the wind, the lift, the sky, all with a seriousness that is heartbreakingly beautiful. Their imaginations aren't just wild stories, they are blueprints for survival. In every moment they spend in this imagined world, they are taking control of something in their lives when so much has been stolen from them.
What is so deeply moving about this part of the story is the way the film respects the boy's imagination. It doesn't mock it. It doesn't try to pull the audience back into the confines of strict reality. Instead, it invites us to fully step into their vision, to believe alongside them, to see the soaring wagon not as a childish daydream, but as something as real as the bruises on Bobby's body.
The movie makes us understand that for these boys, imagination is not a luxury. It is oxygen. It is how they keep breathing in a house where they are otherwise suffocating. Mike, in particular, becomes the keeper of this imagined world. His deep love for Bobby and his growing guilt for being unable to protect him in real life pushes him to commit fully to this dream. His imagination is both a refuge and a responsibility. He must make Bobby believe it's possible. He must believe it himself. Because if he lets the cracks of doubt slip in, if he allows reality to take over, the whole fragile world they've built will collapse, and Bobby's hope will shatter with it. The stakes are impossibly high, not because of whether the wagon can fly, but because of what that flight represents. It represents freedom, safety, survival. The beauty of imagination in Radio Flyer is that it is shared. It is a bond. It is not one boy hiding in his mind. It is two brothers weaving a world together, step by step, piece by piece. They rely on each other to keep the dream alive. Every afternoon spent working on the wagon, every late night whisper about how high it could fly, every careful calculation about wings and speed becomes a ritual, a sacred act of rebellion against the life that has been forced upon them. The power of imagination in this story also speaks to the universal human need to find ways to endure suffering. Sometimes the harsh facts of life are too heavy, too brutal to face head on, especially for children. The mind, beautiful and resilient, finds ways to build parallel worlds where things can still turn out okay, where escape is possible. The film never fully tells us whether the flight is real or imagined, but it makes it clear that what matters is the belief, the faith in something better. For Mike, the story he tells his sons is not just a bedtime tale, it is his own memory, wrapped in the careful fabric of imagination that allowed him to survive the unbearable truth. He invites his sons and the audience to believe with him, to step into that same hopeful world where wagons can fly and love is strong enough to break the chains of even the darkest realities. In this chapter, imagination is not just a tool, it becomes a lifeline, the one thing that can carry Bobby out of the reach of the king, and the one thing that allows Mike to carry the weight of this story into his adulthood. The power of imagination in Radio Flyer is a gentle yet thunderous reminder that sometimes the stories we create are the only way we know how to save ourselves. They are the only way we can find freedom when life leaves us no doors, only walls. And for these two brothers, imagination is not an escape, it is everything. As the story deepens, Radio Flyer begins to pull the audience into the suffocating and inescapable grip of fear that quietly builds inside the boy's home. It is a fear that does not explode in a single moment. It grows slowly, relentlessly, like a shadow that gets longer as the sun sets. The king, their stepfather, tightens his silent reign over Mike and Bobby with a chilling subtlety that makes his presence feel even more dangerous. His face is still never fully revealed, and this choice is painfully intentional. It transforms him from a man into a looming force of terror, something faceless, nameless, something that exists everywhere and nowhere at once. He becomes the embodiment of fear itself, and his power is most evident in the way he doesn't need to speak, doesn't need to chase. The mere sound of his footsteps, the distant jingle of his belt, is enough to send waves of panic through the boys' hearts. What makes this chapter so heartbreakingly profound is the way it shows fear settling into the rhythm of their daily lives, creeping into every corner, staining even their happiest moments. The boys begin to live in a constant state of alertness, their young bodies unconsciously trained to listen for warning signs, the creak of the floorboards, the slamming of a door, the low rumble of the king's voice when something has gone wrong. The terror is not loud, it is quiet, suffocating, and always near. The walls of their home, which were meant to provide safety, now echo with dread, turning what should have been a sanctuary into a prison from which there is no visible escape. Their mother, though full of love, remains heartbreakingly blind to the depth of the boy's suffering. Her need to believe in the life she has chosen, in the man she has welcomed into their home, keeps her from seeing the bruises, both visible and invisible, that multiply with each passing day. This emotional distance adds another crushing layer to the boy's isolation. The one person who should have been their protector is too entangled in her own dreams of stability to hear their silent cries for help. And so, Mike and Bobby are left to protect each other, to shoulder the unbearable weight of fear together, creating an unspoken pact of brotherhood that transcends everything else in their world. As the fear grows, the boys retreat further into their imagination, finding in their secret project, the flying wagon, a space where they can breathe. But even in their moments of creative escape, the presence of the king lingers like a storm waiting to break. The boys know that time is running out. Every encounter with their stepfather tightens the noose. Every moment spent in the house is a gamble. The beatings become more brutal, the threats more suffocating, and the space for safety shrinks until all they have left is the impossible dream of flight. Mike, though still a child, feels the crushing responsibility of saving his brother. His love for Bobby is fierce and unwavering, but so is his guilt. He can see the signs that Bobby's spirit is starting to break under the relentless weight of fear. And what terrifies Mike even more is that a part of him begins to believe that maybe their only way out truly is through the sky, that maybe the wagon isn't just a symbol anymore. Maybe it has to work. Maybe believing in it isn't optional. It's their last chance. The film captures the suffocating nature of domestic abuse in a way that feels painfully real. It doesn't rely on loud, exaggerated violence. It shows us how fear becomes a living thing, how it settles into the walls, into the air, into the way children walk and breathe. It shows us how a home can become a place where every second feels like a question. Is this the moment I'll be hurt again? Is this the day it all ends? And in this suffocating space, imagination becomes more than an escape. It becomes the only thing left that can keep the boys' hearts beating. This chapter of growing fear is not just a story detail. It is the deep, aching reality that drives the rest of the film forward. It explains why Bobby has to fly. It explains why Mike has to believe in the impossible. Because when the walls of your world are closing in and no one can hear you, sometimes the only door left is the one you build with your own hands, even if it leads to the sky. The growing fear in Radio Flyer is not just something the boys endure, it is what transforms them, shapes their love, sharpens their resolve, and ultimately propels them toward the most critical and heartbreaking decision of their young lives. As the danger in their home intensifies and the weight of fear begins to crush them, Radio Flyer slowly peels back its most tender, most powerful layer, the profound, unshakable bond between Mike and Bobby. Their brotherhood is not just a subplot, it is the very soul of the film, the living heartbeat that carries the story forward with every breath, every shared glance, every whispered dream. Their connection is built on something far deeper than blood. It is built on survival, on an instinctive, desperate need to protect each other in a world where no one else can. Mike, though still just a boy himself, shoulders an impossible responsibility. He becomes not only Bobby's brother, but his guardian, his protector, his last line of defense against the king's rage. His love for Bobby is not loud or showy, it is quiet, fierce, and absolute. It becomes the fuel that drives him to believe in the impossible, to create a way out when no one else is coming to save them. What makes their bond so heartbreakingly real is the way it is wrapped in silence. Mike doesn't tell Bobby, I will protect you. He shows it. In the way he takes the beatings meant for Bobby when he can. In the way he wraps his small body around Bobby's after the violence is over. In the way he fiercely dedicates himself to building the flying wagon, pouring every ounce of belief, sweat, and imagination into the project because failure is simply not an option. There is no life for Mike without Bobby. There is no future without this promise kept. For Mike, the wagon is more than a machine. It is a silent vow. I will get you out of here. I will not let this be your whole story. Their moments together are painted with the quiet intimacy of boys who have been forced to grow up too fast. When they talk about flying away, it isn't just fantasy, it's sacred. When they laugh, it's a fragile, fleeting moment of normalcy in a life that offers them so little peace. Mike listens to Bobby with a kind of reverence, treating his brother's dreams as if they are gospel truth. He never once laughs at Bobby's belief that the wagon will work. He never tells him to stop imagining. Mike understands, better than anyone, that to question the dream is to let Bobby fall into despair, and that is something Mike will never allow. The brilliance of this brotherhood is how real it feels. They bicker like brothers. They chase each other through dusty streets. They build their wagon with the clumsy determination of kids who have no idea what they're doing but are willing to bet their lives that it will work. But under every playful moment is the deep, steady hum of love that carries them through the worst of it. Mike never says he's scared, but we feel his fear in the way he clings to Bobby when no one is looking. Bobby never says he's giving up, but we see it in the way his shoulders slump after another night of terror. And yet, every time the darkness threatens to swallow them, they find each other again. They hold each other up. They rebuild the dream. The unspoken part of their bond, the part that makes it so devastating, is that Mike knows. Somewhere deep inside, Mike knows that maybe wagons can't fly. Maybe what they're building is not something that physics will ever allow, but he has to believe. For Bobby? For himself. Because to stop believing would mean accepting that there is no way out, that the fear will never end, that the pain will swallow them whole. And so Mike carries this impossible weight, the weight of keeping Bobby's hope alive while carrying his own crumbling heart in silence. The way the film portrays this brotherhood is not through grand speeches or dramatic declarations. It is through quiet actions, small glances, gentle touches, and the relentless, stubborn act of showing up every day to build something that might just save them. It's in the way Mike brushes the dirt off Bobby's face after a fall, the way he patches up their wagon again and again, the way he teaches Bobby to believe even when the world gives them no reason to. Their bond is not just emotional, it is the very thread holding their souls together. It's the reason Mike can grow into a man who tells this story to his sons, passing down the memory not as a tale of tragedy, but as a testament to what love, imagination, and brotherhood can achieve when everything else is falling apart. In Radio Flyer, the brotherhood between Mike and Bobby is not simply a part of the story, it is the story. It is the reason we hope, the reason we ache, the reason we believe in the possibility of flight. It is the reason we come to understand that sometimes, when the world refuses to save us, all we have left is each other. And sometimes, that is enough. As Radio Flyer unfolds deeper into the boy's fragile world, one of the most agonizing layers begins to rise from the shadows. Mike's overwhelming sense of powerlessness, a silent, suffocating guilt that begins to weigh so heavily on his young shoulders that it nearly crushes him. Mike, though only a child himself, is forced to carry the unbearable responsibility of watching his brother suffer without having the strength, the size, or the authority to stop it. He is trapped in a brutal reality where he knows what is happening to Bobby is wrong, that it should be stopped. But the cruel truth of childhood is that sometimes children cannot stand between monsters and the people they love. Sometimes the world is too big, too cruel, and too silent for a boy to fight back against it. And so, Mike is swallowed by a pain that has no name, an aching, gnawing guilt that lives quietly behind his determined eyes, a guilt that whispers to him in the quiet of the night, "Why can't I save him?" This inner struggle is not loud. Mike never says it out loud, not to Bobby, not to his mother, not even to himself in direct words. But the film shows it to us in the way he watches Bobby when no one else is looking, in the way his small hands tremble when the sound of the king's belt echoes through the walls, in the way his breathing changes when Bobby comes to him, broken, after another beating. Mike's guilt is a silent companion, a shadow that never leaves his side. It is the crushing belief that somehow, as the older brother, he should have been able to shield Bobby from the pain, from the bruises, from the terror. Even though he is just a child, Mike internalizes the impossible responsibility of protection, and it begins to eat away at him, slowly, relentlessly. The moments where Mike's powerlessness is most visible are the ones that hurt the most. He stands frozen outside a door, listening to Bobby's cries, his fists clenched, his eyes desperate, but he does not go in. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he knows if he does, he might only make it worse. Because he knows that his small frame, his young voice, cannot stop the monster on the other side of that door. And so, Mike is forced to live with that unbearable inaction, with the knowledge that he can hear his brother's pain, and yet he cannot stop it. This is the kind of guilt that doesn't heal. It is the kind of guilt that follows a person into adulthood, that quietly shapes who they become, how they love, how they raise their own children. The flying wagon becomes, in many ways, Mike's desperate answer to this crushing guilt. It is his way of taking back control, of building a solution where no other solution exists. The wagon is not just Bobby's escape, it is Mike's redemption. Every nail he hammers, every wheel he tightens, every wing he carefully constructs is Mike's way of saying, I can save you, I will save you. The project becomes a sacred mission, a refusal to accept that Bobby's only fate is to remain trapped under the king's reign. For Mike, failure is not an option, not because he dreams of victory, but because the weight of not trying would destroy him. If the wagon does not fly, Mike would have to live with the unbearable truth that he failed his brother, that he let the world crush him, that he stood by while Bobby needed him most. What makes this layer of the story so devastatingly human is that it is not exclusive to Mike. It speaks to every child who has ever felt too small to protect the people they love. It speaks to the helplessness that so many victims, siblings, and silent witnesses carry long after the moment has passed. It shows us that sometimes the deepest scars are not the ones left on the body, but the ones that form when you are forced to watch someone you love suffer, and you can do nothing to stop it. Mike's silent guilt is what eventually drives him to tell this story to his own sons. As an adult, he is not just recounting a childhood memory, he is confessing the weight he has carried, the ache that has never fully left him. Telling the story is his way of finally breaking his own silence, of teaching his sons what he once wished someone had taught him, that sometimes life is brutally unfair, but we must never stop believing in the possibility of escape, in the power of love, in the salvation we build with our own hands. The pain of powerlessness in Radio Flyer is one of the most honest, raw, and heartbreaking elements of the entire story. It is not neatly resolved, it does not fade with time, it lingers, shaping Mike's soul, shaping the man he becomes, and reminding us all that sometimes the only way to carry such unbearable guilt is to transform it into a story that dares to hope, even when the world says there is no hope left. As Radio Flyer drifts further into its sorrowful depths, the mother's role in the boy's life begins to unfold with a complexity that is as heartbreaking as it is tragically human. She is not the villain in this story, nor is she the savior she desperately wants to be. She exists in the painful gray area of a parent who loves fiercely but fails to see. Her blindness is not one of indifference. It is a blindness born from exhaustion, from a relentless fight to piece together a life that keeps falling apart, from the desperate hope that this time things will finally be okay. Her love for her sons is evident. Her laughter, her soft words, her attempts to create a happy home all come from a place of genuine devotion. But love, in this world, is not enough. Her inability to see the silent terror growing inside her home is the tragic thread that leaves her boys to fend for themselves, to build their own escape when no one else will. What makes her blindness so devastating is that it isn't malicious. She is not cruel. She is simply tired. Life has battered her. She has fought through poverty, loneliness, and the crushing weight of single motherhood. And when the king enters her life, she clings to him like a final chance at stability. She wants to believe that this man can provide the family with the security she has never been able to give them alone. She needs him to be good so badly that she forces herself to overlook the dark, creeping signs of what he really is. In her eyes, the bruises on Bobby are accidents, the boy's silences are just part of childhood, and the fear that flickers in their eyes is a ghost she simply cannot allow herself to see. There is a haunting sadness in her denial. She is a woman standing on a crumbling foundation, desperately plastering the walls with good intentions, pretending the cracks aren't growing deeper with each passing day. The tragedy is that, in her desire to build something whole, she inadvertently leaves her sons in a home where they must learn to survive alone. Her blindness is not passive, it is active. It is a choice she makes again and again to look away because looking too closely would shatter the fragile dream she is trying so hard to hold together. And yet, we feel her love. We feel that she does not want to harm her children, but in her refusal to see, harm finds them anyway. This painful contradiction is one of the film's most brutally honest portrayals of how abuse can thrive in silence. The mother's love is real, but it is not enough to protect her sons. She laughs at dinner tables where her boys tremble inside. She brings home new curtains while Mike and Bobby build a wagon to escape a nightmare she cannot see. She stitches together birthday parties, school supplies, and soft moments with her sons, but these small victories are washed away by the much larger battle she unknowingly ignores. For Mike and Bobby, her blindness becomes another prison. They cannot tell her the truth because they already know she won't hear it. Or worse, that she will hear it and refuse to believe it. This isolation pushes them deeper into each other's arms, into their imagination, into the secret mission that becomes their only hope. The mother, in her desperation to fix her life, fails to notice that her boys have stopped coming to her for protection. She has become a symbol of the home they no longer trust, and that realization, though she never fully faces it, lingers heavily over the story. Perhaps the most painful element of her role is that we know, as the audience, she will have to live with this truth one day. Whether she admits it or not, whether she ever fully understands the magnitude of what she missed, a part of her will always wonder if she could have stopped it, if she could have saved Bobby from the beatings, from the fear, from the desperate plan to fly away. The film does not punish her cruelly, but it does not absolve her either. It simply presents her as a deeply flawed, deeply human mother who wanted to believe in a better story, and in doing so, allowed the worst story to unfold beneath her own roof. The mother's blindness in Radio Flyer is not just a plot point, it is a reflection of a tragic truth that exists in many real homes. Sometimes the people who love us most cannot see what is right in front of them, not because they do not care, but because they are too broken themselves to face it. And so, the burden falls on the smallest shoulders, the youngest hearts to find a way out. In the story Mike later tells his sons, we feel the echo of this failure. We feel the wound of being unseen, of loving someone who did not know how to save you. The mother's blindness becomes a silent legacy that follows Mike into adulthood, shaping the way he raises his own children, shaping the way he chooses to tell this story, not as a warning, but as a deep, aching truth that sometimes love must come with open eyes, or else it will leave the people we love to fight their battles alone. As Radio Flyer progresses into its most emotionally charged chapters, the boys' project, the creation of the flying wagon, evolves from a simple act of play into something sacred, something that carries the weight of their very survival. What begins as an imaginative escape slowly transforms into a mission of divine importance. A project that is no longer just about crafting wings or finding the right launch point. It becomes the boys' last hope, the final chance to rewrite a life that has given them no safe options. This is not a mere pastime for Mike and Bobby. This is their sanctuary, their rebellion, their desperate prayer to a world that has never listened to them before. The process of building the wagon is painted in the film with such intimate, delicate strokes that it feels almost ritualistic. Each day, The boys return to their hidden worksite, as if stepping into a sacred space, their young hands fumbling with tools far too large for them, their determination etched into every movement. The materials they gather, pieces of wood, scraps of metal, fragments of discarded toys, are the broken parts of the world around them. And in their hands, these broken things are repurposed into something that just might save them. This act of building is not just mechanical, it is deeply spiritual. It is a refusal to surrender, a quiet but roaring act of defiance against the king, against powerlessness, against the walls closing in around them. What is profoundly beautiful about this chapter is the unwavering childlike faith that drives the boys forward. They do not spend their days calculating the physics of flight, nor do they question whether such a thing is possible. They simply believe. And that belief is their armor against the crushing weight of reality. The more the adults in their lives fail them, the more they pour themselves into the project. The more Bobby's bruises darken, the more fervently Mike works, hammering, tightening, designing, because to stop would be to admit defeat. In this small corner of their world, they have total control. Here, the laws of gravity do not apply. Here, the sky is within reach. Mike's silent leadership over the project reveals so much about his heart. His hands shake not from doubt, but from the suffocating knowledge that this wagon must work. He cannot afford failure. His brother's life, his brother's hope, rests in this impossible invention. Mike does not dare to say out loud that he worries it won't fly, because to speak that fear is to let it become real, and so he pushes forward with a ferocity that can only come from love. Every turn of the wrench, every tightening of a screw is a promise. I will save you. I will find a way. What makes this project so profoundly heartbreaking is that the film never gives us the comfort of absolute certainty. We, as the audience, are not told whether the wagon's flight is a literal escape or a story Mike has crafted to shield his heart from the unbearable pain of what truly happened. But that uncertainty is the very soul of the story. It forces us to understand that for Mike and Bobby, belief was never optional. Belief was survival. Belief was the only thing standing between them and despair. For them, the wagon did not need to obey the rules of the adult world. It only needed to fly in their hearts, in their eyes, in their desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, there was a life beyond fear. Their dedication to the project also reveals the heartbreaking absence of adults in their lives who could have intervened, who should have stepped in to rescue them. With each passing day, as they labor over their sacred machine, we are reminded of their isolation, of how the burden of survival has been placed on the smallest, most innocent shoulders. This is a story where children are forced to become architects of their own salvation, not because they wanted to, but because the world left them no other choice. The flying wagon becomes a monument to their love, their courage, and their refusal to be crushed by circumstances beyond their control. It is not just wood and wheels, it is every whispered secret, every shed tear, every unspoken prayer wrapped into one fragile, glorious, impossible machine. For Mike and Bobby, the wagon is the only thing in their world that makes sense. It is their rebellion, it is their freedom, it is their final, beautiful act of hope in a story that has given them so few reasons to believe. In this sacred project, we see the soul of Radio Flyer, the aching, powerful truth that sometimes the things children build with their hands are the only things holding them together. And sometimes, when the world refuses to save them, children must build their own wings. Dot. As Radio Flyer hurtles toward its emotional climax, the passage of time begins to shift from a quiet backdrop to an oppressive, relentless force pressing in on Mike and Bobby. Time, which once seemed like a soft and distant thing, now becomes their greatest enemy, a ticking clock counting down to an inevitable confrontation with the king, a deadline that grows heavier with each passing moment. The cruel reality is that the boys no longer have the luxury of waiting. Bobby's bruises are becoming more frequent, the violence is escalating, and the window of safety is closing rapidly. What was once a dream, a whimsical construction of hope, now becomes an urgent race against time. The boys know it. We know it. Every scene begins to pulse with the rising tension of a deadline that could mean the difference between freedom and complete destruction. What makes this looming countdown so suffocating is that no one else seems to notice it. The mother drifts through the days, caught in her own struggle, blind to the urgency building in her son's hearts. The outside world hums along, oblivious to the silent battle unfolding in that small home. Only Mike and Bobby feel the walls tightening. Only they can hear the imaginary clock ticking louder and louder in their ears. This countdown is not marked by calendar pages or wristwatches. It is marked by Bobby's growing fear, by Mike's increasingly frantic efforts, by the desperation that begins to seep into their every movement. Their secret project, once built with hopeful patience, is now a lifeline they must finish before the next time the king loses control. The way the film builds this sense of time is masterful. Scenes become shorter, quicker. Conversations grow tenser. Even the boys' laughter starts to feel hurried, as if they know that each moment of joy must be stolen from the jaws of something dark that is quickly approaching. The wagon, their symbol of escape, is no longer a distant goal. It must be finished now. The bruises on Bobby's small body are not just signs of past violence, they are warnings that the worst is yet to come. And Mike, driven by a love so fierce it borders on desperation, throws himself into the work with the knowledge that this might be the only way left to save his brother. Mike begins to feel the unbearable weight of the clock pressing on his chest. He cannot sleep, cannot stop, cannot waste a second. Every bolt he fastens, every wheel he aligns is done with shaking hands because he knows what failure will cost. The stakes are no longer abstract. They are Bobby's life. They are the possibility of losing his brother forever, of failing to be the protector he promised to be. This cruel countdown forces Mike to push past the limits of exhaustion, past the quiet whispers of doubt that threaten to break his resolve. He becomes a boy possessed by a singular mission: get Bobby out, get Bobby free. And yet, despite the panic that time brings, there is also an aching beauty in how the boys spend their final days together. They still find ways to laugh, to imagine, to steal small moments of childhood amidst the growing storm. These moments are tinged with a bittersweet awareness that their time together is running out, that the flight they are planning is no longer just a story, it is the final chapter of their brotherhood as they know it. The countdown is cruel because it does not slow for love. It does not pause for children. It does not offer second chances. It moves forward with brutal indifference, and the boys, still so small, are racing against it with everything they have. The pain of this countdown is compounded by the silent understanding between Mike and Bobby that they may never see each other again after the wagon flies. Though it is never spoken, it hovers between them like a fragile thread. Mike is not just building a machine to save Bobby, he is building a goodbye, a final act of love that will cost him more than he can possibly know. He understands that his role is to push Bobby toward freedom, even if it means being left behind. The ticking clock forces him to accept this heartbreaking reality. The countdown also sharpens the story's deeper theme, that sometimes life does not wait for children to grow strong enough. Sometimes the smallest among us are forced to make impossible choices with impossible speed. Mike and Bobby do not get to slowly plan their way out. They must act now because the violence is coming, because time is not on their side, because tomorrow may be too late. In this cruel countdown, Radio Flyer shows us that childhood is not always a protected space. Sometimes it is a battleground where love, fear, and urgency collide. Sometimes it is a place where time runs out long before help ever arrives. And in this space, Mike and Bobby show us the ferocious bravery of children who, despite everything, refuse to surrender to the ticking clock. They race against time not because they believe they will win, but because they know they must try. This chapter is a heartbreaking sprint toward destiny, a desperate struggle against the crushing weight of time, and a piercing reminder that when no one else is watching the clock, children are forced to, and sometimes in those final seconds, they build their own wings. Dot. As Radio Flyer approaches its most devastating and tender moment, The story arrives at the final night, a night that stands poised between two worlds, the world of unbearable terror that has stalked Mike and Bobby, and the world of impossible hope that they have dared to build for themselves. The final night is not just a passage of hours, it is the emotional crescendo where every thread the boys have stitched together now tightens into a single breathless moment. The weight of everything that has come before, the bruises, the silent promises, the hurried construction of the flying wagon, all presses down on this night with suffocating intensity. There is no more time. The clock has struck. The moment to fly or to fall has arrived. The atmosphere of this night is so thick with tension, it feels like the air itself could shatter under the strain. The house is unbearably quiet, every creak of the floorboards echoing like gunshots in the silence. Mike and Bobby's mother drifts through the home, still painfully unaware of the gravity pressing on her sons, still holding to the fragile illusion that tomorrow will be just another day. But Mike and Bobby know differently. They know that tomorrow, if Bobby is still here, there may be no more chances. The violence has escalated too far. The beatings have grown too brutal. Bobby's time is running out. What makes the final night so achingly beautiful is the softness with which the boys approach it. They do not panic, they do not cry. Instead, they move through the night with quiet resolve, as if they both understand that this is their last shared chapter. Mike helps Bobby prepare for the flight with tender, methodical care, adjusting the straps, securing the pieces of the wagon, checking every bolt with a precision that belies his young age. His hands, still small, tremble not with fear, but with the crushing responsibility of knowing that this is his final chance to save his brother. Their conversation on this night is laced with unspoken love, unspoken grief, unspoken farewell. Bobby still clings to his childlike wonder, his unshakable belief that the wagon will carry him to freedom, to a place where the king's belt cannot follow, where bruises fade and fear dissolves into the clouds. Mike, though older, does not correct him. He does not question the dream. He leans into it fully because he knows that Bobby's belief is what will lift the wagon off the ground. His love for his brother is so complete that he chooses the dream over the cold truth. In this final moment, Mike surrenders to the story they've built, not because he is certain it will work, but because he cannot bear to leave Bobby without hope. The walk to the launch site feels like a funeral march wrapped inside a fairy tale. The darkness wraps around them, the cool night air pressing against their skin as they push the wagon, this fragile machine built from scraps, from broken toys, from the stubborn refusal to give up, toward the edge of the world they have known. Bobby's eyes shimmer with anticipation, his heart soaring even before the wheels leave the ground. Mike's heart, though heavy, beats with a fierce resolve. I will see this through. I will believe with him. I will send him into the sky if it is the last thing I do. As they reach the top of the hill, the enormity of what is about to happen begins to wrap tightly around them. Mike makes the final adjustments, his breath trembling in the cold air, his fingers brushing against Bobby's shoulder in one last gesture of brotherhood. They exchange a look that holds everything they cannot say. I love you. I believe in you. This is goodbye. Mike knows that if Bobby flies tonight, he may never see him again, and yet he pushes the wagon forward anyway, because his love for Bobby is not about holding on, it is about letting go. The launch itself is filmed with breathtaking tenderness, the moment stretching out as the wagon races down the hill, the wind catching its makeshift wings, the impossible beginning to seem possible. Whether the wagon truly lifts off the ground, or whether this is the final flourish of Mike's protective memory, is left beautifully ambiguous. But what the film makes clear is that in this moment, Bobby is free. Whether he flies or not, whether the laws of physics bend for him or not, Bobby's spirit soars beyond the reach of fear, beyond the reach of the king, beyond the walls that once caged him. For Mike, this final night is a quiet triumph wrapped in devastating loss. He has kept his silent promise. He has built the wings. He has sent his brother to a place where pain can no longer touch him. And yet, he is left behind, standing alone on the hill, the wagon's rumble fading into the distance, the weight of everything crushing down on his young shoulders. He does not weep, he does not crumble, he simply watches, a boy forever changed by the choice he was forced to make. The final night in Radio Flyer is a masterclass in storytelling, a night that is as much about the courage to believe as it is about the heartbreak of letting go. It is a moment where terror and hope sit side by side, where the impossible feels not just real, but necessary. It is the night where love takes flight, where brotherhood finds its wings, and where a child's desperate dream becomes the only truth that matters. As Radio Flyer reaches its most unforgettable and emotionally shattering moment, everything builds toward the instant Bobby's wagon takes flight, a moment suspended perfectly between memory and myth, between the brutal weight of reality and the soaring freedom of belief. This is not just the climax of the story, it is the culmination of every silent promise, every bruise endured, every whispered hope shared between Mike and Bobby. The moment of flight is not about physics or logic, it is about the profound power of love and imagination to lift someone out of the deepest despair. It is the very heartbeat of the film, a heartbeat that echoes long after the credits roll. When Bobby launches down the hill in his patched together wagon, the air itself seems to hold its breath. Mike, standing at the top, watches with a mixture of desperate hope and paralyzing fear. His entire soul is pinned to the success of this flight because he knows what failure means. Failure would mean Bobby is trapped forever, that the beating waiting for him at home would be the end, that his dream of freedom would collapse like broken wings. But Mike cannot let himself believe in failure. He has staked his entire heart, his entire being, on the belief that the wagon will fly. His love for Bobby will not allow him to imagine any other outcome. The wagon races down the track, faster and faster, the wind tearing past Bobby's face, the homemade wings trembling but holding steady. In this suspended moment, reality begins to blur. The film does not give us clear confirmation. Does the wagon truly lift off the ground? Do we witness a real flight? Or is this the crystallized version of Mike's memory, reshaped over the years to preserve the beautiful lie that his brother escaped? The ambiguity is intentional. It forces us to confront the possibility that sometimes what matters most is not what actually happened, but what we need to believe happened in order to survive. Mike's narration in his older voice frames this moment as a truth he has carried into adulthood, a truth he chooses to pass on to his own sons. He tells them the story not as a man desperate for closure, but as a brother who made peace with the fact that some stories live best in the blurry space between fact and faith. Whether the wagon truly soared into the sky, or whether it was a sacred fiction Mike built to cope with unspeakable loss, the result is the same. Bobby is free. In Mike's heart, Bobby made it. He escaped. He soared beyond the reach of the king, beyond the suffocating walls of their home, beyond the crushing grip of fear. The brilliance of this moment is that it allows both readings to exist side by side. It allows us to believe that maybe, just maybe, the impossible happened, that a wagon, built by two desperate boys with trembling hands and wild hearts, took to the skies because it simply had to. And yet, it also allows us to see that perhaps Mike, in his unbearable grief, shaped his memory to give his brother the wings he could never give him in life. Either way, the moment is a triumph. It is a declaration that love, in its purest, fiercest form, can build miracles, even if those miracles exist only in the spaces between memory and imagination. What makes this flight so deeply moving is how quietly it is delivered. There is no triumphant music, no dramatic explosion of sound. The wagon simply glides into the air, or appears to, and the camera lingers gently on the image of Bobby in flight. It feels personal, intimate, as if the story itself is whispering to us. Believe what you need to believe. Choose hope. Choose love. Mike's face, watching his brother disappear into the distance, holds a mixture of heartbreak and profound relief. He has fulfilled his promise. He has done the impossible. And even though he is left behind, he stands tall, knowing that Bobby's story does not end in fear. This moment of flight is not just the emotional peak of Radio Flyer, it is the soul of the film. It invites us to understand that sometimes stories, especially the ones we tell ourselves to survive, carry their own truth, even if they defy the rules of the real world. Mike's story, whether literal or metaphorical, is a monument to the unshakable power of brotherhood, to the resilience of the human spirit, and to the sacred childlike faith that sometimes, if you build your wings carefully enough, you really can fly away from the pain. The moment of flight, poised perfectly between the heartbreak of life and the soaring beauty of belief, is where Radio Flyer leaves us, breathless, questioning, aching, and ultimately choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, the impossible is within reach. After the moment of flight, when Bobby's wagon disappears into the sky, whether truly or in Mike's aching memory, the story shifts into a quiet, reflective aftermath that is perhaps the most emotionally crushing chapter of Radio Flyer. Bobby is gone. The flight has ended. And what remains is Mike, standing alone at the edge of that hill, the wind brushing against his face, the weight of his silent promise fulfilled, but at an unbearable cost. This aftermath is not filled with triumphant celebrations or clear answers. It is steeped in the heavy silence that follows when you love someone so fiercely that you let them go, when you choose to rewrite a story so they can fly, even if it means you are left to walk the rest of the road alone. Mike's loneliness in the days that follow is not loud. It is suffocating in its quietness. He returns to a house that now feels colder, emptier, and stretched painfully wide by Bobby's absence. His mother, tragically unaware of the true depth of what has